This is one of those areas where I really would have loved to be wrong, but I wasn't. Again. I told you, ladies and gentlemen, that if Governor Gavin the Gravel Gargler survived his recall election, we would see the return of every biosecurity police state measure. It would happen in fairly short order, and it would be done purely out of spite and hubris. And so, starting this Wednesday, we in California will be welcoming the return of mandatory religious face coverings in all indoor venues. But hey, let's look on the bright side. If you just got your Christmas tree and it didn't quite drown out the stench of the hobo poop on the sidewalk out in front of your house, maybe the face diaper will do the trick. You never know. Of course, it goes without saying that the people could, if they so chose, render this mandate irrelevant by a mass refusal to comply. Unfortunately, in this state at least, I think we've long since passed the threshold where the share of the population that's made up of paranoid, self-deluded hypochondriacs for whom performative obedience is the greatest act of moral courage is too large to be countervailed by the share of the population that is made up of normal people who retain their sanity and their capacity for reason and care about their most basic rights. But notwithstanding that, even still, this should be a time for business owners who have been abused by this governor just about as badly as can be imagined, to declare their non-compliance, at least insofar as they're willing to say, nope, sorry, we're not going to be your hall monitors, we're not going to be your goon squad. If you're imposing a mandate and you want it policed, you can police it your damn self. We will not be your informer. We won't inform on our customers. We won't inform on our employees. And besides, as a result of your soft-on-crime policies, we're too busy boarding up the windows to have time left over for enforcing your stupid religious face-covering law. You would think the business owners would have had enough of this crap by now, that they'd be disinclined to go along with more of it, but we likely are going to see the same thing we always do. Everybody will just mindlessly obey and do exactly what the government says they should do. Probably right up until it's time to start rounding up the unvaccinated and packing them onto train cars for the ride to the friendly quarantine camp, which they, of course, are already doing in North Australia. And I guess it's the most perverse of all possible ironies that the biggest cohort of unvaccinated North Australians, and thus the people most likely to be tossed into a concentration camp, are the Aborigines. In other words, innocent black Australians are being imprisoned indefinitely without charge or trial by the white liberal Australians who run the state government right here in the year 2021. And it hasn't occurred to any of the people doing the imprisoning that it might evoke some fairly unpleasant comparisons to the previous mistreatment of that same population group by that same government. And Austria, too, speaking of that, Austria, of all places. If you were making a list of countries that should know better than to ever start building concentration camps for any reason, wouldn't Austria be like number 2? And a pretty solid number 2, if we're being honest. My God, talk about lacking national self-awareness. And look, yeah, I know technically Austria got annexed into the Third Reich against its will, but let's face it. It's not like they put up a very spirited fight. It's not like any Austrian soldiers fell defending their national frontier against the German invader, since they were too busy gleefully throwing open all the border gates. And for us in America, it used to be just a funny joke when we would talk about FEMA or the CDC building camps to house the political enemies of the Democrat Party. But in a world where Australia and Austria are both in the concentration camp business now, where mass incarceration of political dissidents is becoming the new status quo in countries we used to regard as perfectly sane outposts of Western liberal democracy, we can't treat it like a joke anymore because it's not one. If you went to Tony Fauci and told him there's a legal mechanism whereby he could indefinitely jail all of his enemies and all of his critics, do you think for one moment he wouldn't jump at the chance? Oh, yeah, and can we waterboard the prisoners too? I always wanted to waterboard someone, especially sit at a pool. From high atop the battlements of Castle Curmudgeon, where the current number 1 song on the hit parade is that great classic ballad of yesteryear, Gavin, dear Gavin, eat a bag of dicks for me. Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. America and all ships at sea. Welcome to the program. I am your eponymous host and humble servant, and I apologize for having been absent on Friday. I had to go to the office Christmas party. I obviously would have rather been here with you fine people, but I did neglect to mention it during the Wednesday sign-off, so sorry about that. But of all the rotten luck, of all the nights to have a prior commitment, I had to pick the day of Jussie Smollett's conviction on 5 out of 6 felony counts. So at long last, we can finally omit the word allegedly when we talk about Mr. Smollett's hate crime hoax escapade. We can come right out and say it, since it's now a matter of settled jurisprudence for the historical record that our boy Jussie paid a couple of Nigerian weightlifters $3,500 to give him a fake-ass beating. And it's that most basic of all the facts in the case that is my favorite thing about it. Why? Because this is such an absurdly non-racist country that this idiot couldn't even find a couple of actual white racist Trump supporters to perpetrate the fake attack on him. And think about that. He's already concocted a narrative that says, black gay actor attacked by white Trump supporters in racist, homophobic hate crime. If you wanted it to be convincing, it seems like the logical first step would be to find a couple of actual white racist Trump supporters, would it not? So how bad do you actually have to strike out that you wind up having to settle for taking your 2 Nigerian weightlifter buddies and putting some Johnson & Johnson baby powder on their faces? I am by no means a galaxy brain criminal mastermind in the same league as our friend Mr. Smollett, but even still, from my layman's perspective, it seems like when your plot has disintegrated to the point where you're taking a guy named Olabinjo Usandaro and slapping baby powder on his face so that he can hopefully pass for a white racist redneck, then your plot's chances for success are probably not very robust. In fact, I think Jeff Galooly's plot for busting up Nancy Kerrigan's knee was actually a better criminal operation than this one that Jussie Smollett put together. And that's something that I would never say lightly, ladies and gentlemen, because Jeff Galooly is the gold standard, no pun intended, of ill-conceived criminal plots. So much so that his last name actually entered the English lexicon as a byword for criminal plots that are so dumb it strains credulity that someone was actually serious when they came up with it. So I think the loftiest honor I can pay to Mr. Smollett is to say this. Mr. Smollett, Jussie, may I call you Jussie? You, sir, have pulled a Galooly. In fact, maybe one day, Jussie, the public esteem of your crime will grow in the nation's collective memory to such proportions that we won't be able to just call it a Galooly anymore. We'll have to call it a Galooly Smollett or a Smollett Galooly. It'll be like Lennon McCartney or Lieber Stoller or Rogers Hammerstein. Generations of fans will spend decades arguing over who was the greater genius and who should receive top billing. And you know, since we're going down this road, I think Mr. Smollett can settle the argument once and for all if, the next time he stages a fake hate crime on himself, the person who finds him is Nancy Kerrigan, and she drops to the ground right next to him, and they both start shrieking, "Why? Why?" See, I just wrote this thing better than you did, Jussie, so you're welcome. And speaking of self-delusional people who should probably be in mental hospitals, the greatest female swimmer in the history of the Ivy League is in the news again today, and he's still a dude, and he apparently can't contain his excitement about just how much fun it is to be a guy swimmer who dominates girl swimmers. So if you haven't heard, this guy's teammates, that is to say, the members of the women's team who are actually women, they've begun speaking to the press on condition of anonymity because they don't want their lives to be permanently ruined by the woke hate machine, which is not an unreasonable sentiment, frankly, and you'll be shocked to learn, except you won't, that girl swimmers are not crazy about being teammates with a girl swimmer who 12 months ago was a 20-year-old man and is now a 20-year-old man who's had a bit of cosmetic surgery and wears a girl swimsuit and a bit of makeup. This is a direct quote. "That was so easy. I was cruising. I'm number 1 in the country." That's according to this latest anonymous teammate. And we might as well call these young women whistleblowers because that's what they are. And that is Like I said, a direct quote from the young man who's been smashing all the women's Ivy League records lately, whose name I will continue to assiduously avoid saying, because I consider his actions revolting, and I will not participate in giving him the notoriety that he so desperately seeks. So this guy is laughing and gloating over the fact that he is crushing competitors over whom he enjoys an unfair, insurmountable physical advantage. Except everybody knows this is wrong, and they know why it's wrong. Two of the teammates have spoken out, and they report that nobody on the team is okay with any of this stuff, but everybody has to just go along with it. It's worse than that. They have to pretend to cheer for it. They have to pretend they think it's awesome. They have to pretend that something called social justice is being advanced when they, the women on the women's team, the women who worked their asses off to earn their swimming scholarships, have to be reduced to placeholders, whose only function is to measure the greatness of their transgender teammate while he rewrites the women's record book. And what sort of message is that sending to those young ladies on that team? Because it seems, from where your host sits, like the message is, if you're not cheating, you're not trying. If this is the sort of thing we are expected to celebrate now, then we can no longer pretend that as a society we value fair play and honest competition. We will be lying when we tell little kids that the game they're playing is fair and on the level, and they're being evenly matched with their competitors, and nobody has an unfair advantage. If we are going to let transgenders make a complete mockery of girls' and women's sports and rewrite all the record books, then all of that stuff is out the window forever. Once we have crossed that Rubicon, we can no longer pretend to be a people who value a level playing field and honorable competition. For the message we will be sending is the opposite of that. The message will be win at all costs. Nothing is off limits. Defeating your opponent is the only thing that matters. Fair play is for pussies. If the price of dominating your competition is getting your wedding tackle cut off and pretending to be a girl, then what the hell are you waiting for? You want to dominate the competition, don't you? Now, how old is Bruce Jenner with tits? Isn't he over 70? Because yeah, sometimes you get all the way to retirement age before you realize you've really been a chick this whole time. The point being, when are the next Summer Olympics? 2024? Because I will bet you right now that if Bruce Jenner with tits at age 74 entered the women's decathlon in these next Olympics, he would probably finish in the top 10. And he probably would get another Woman of the Year award out of it. But you know what? Since I've gone and dragged Bruce Jenner into this and his tits, there's another phenomenon I've noticed that we need to talk about. And you've probably noticed it too. And the other person this concerns is the actress Ellen Page, who's recently decided that she's actually an actor named Elliot Page. Except here's the thing. Stop writing articles that say a woman named Caitlyn Jenner won the men's decathlon in Montreal in 1976. And stop retroactively editing movie credits to say that an actor named Elliot Page appeared in films that the actress Ellen Page appeared in. I swear to God, it hadn't been 1 week after Bruce Jenner came out and became Bruce Jenner with tits that I saw my first headline saying something like, Caitlyn Jenner talks about her win in the 1976 Olympic decathlon. I mean, seriously? The cultural tyranny of radical transgenderism is so complete, so all-encompassing that we have to pretend a girl named Caitlyn won the men's decathlon at the 76 Olympics? And whom does that help exactly? How is the condition of the society, or anyone in it, advanced in any material way by the rigid enforcement of such mass self-delusion? The winner of the 1976 men's decathlon was a guy named Bruce Jenner. That is a historical event that happened. It cannot be retroactively changed into something else just because Bruce Jenner decided 40 years later that it would be fun to get his tallywhacker removed. And by the same token, the actress Ellen Page appeared in dozens of films between 1997 and 2020, playing female characters who did female things. An actor named Elliot Page did not play a pregnant teenage girl in Juno in 2007. An actor named Elliot Page did not play Rainn Wilson's female sidekick in Super in 2010. And speaking of that picture, to put it bluntly, if you haven't seen it, that movie contains a scene in which the character of the female sidekick, played by the actress Ellen Page, has non-consensual intercourse with the male lead played by the actor Rainn Wilson. To put it even more bluntly, she rapes him. So how the hell am I supposed to view that scene when we are retroactively editing reality to say that all of the roles previously played by the actress Ellen Page were actually played by the actor Elliot Page? Did this female-on-male rape scene magically become a male-on-male rape scene 10 years later when I watch Juno now? Am I supposed to view it as a heartwarming tale of a pregnant young male homosexual? Because here I thought, for all these years, that Arnold Schwarzenegger was the only dude who ever gave birth in a movie. Well, I guess since we are on the subject of people trying to creatively edit the past, we might as well close tonight by talking about our good friend Hillary Clinton, whom you may remember as the lady who paid to have her opponent in the 2016 election framed as a Russian spy, only to lose the election anyway, after which she blamed her defeat on Russian spies. Hillary has been popping up again with some frequency these past couple weeks. First with a ridiculous, blubbery, humiliating reading of the 2016 victory speech that she never got to deliver. And again yesterday when she gave an interview in which she declared that if Donald Trump regains the presidency in 2024, then it will be the end of something called our democracy. And there are starting to be whispers now here and there that since the current president is so historically unpopular and such a cognitive mess that he makes late-period Woodrow Wilson appear lucid and focused by comparison, and since the current vice president is somehow even less popular than that, then Hillary might be circling like a vulture trying to grab one more shot at that brass ring. But at the end of the day, isn't Hillary Clinton just like the fake girl swimmer at Penn University? Isn't it the exact same mentality? Just as the swimmer can't tolerate a version of reality where he is not a dominant competitor who rewrites the Ivy League record book, Mrs. Clinton cannot accept that the universe has decreed she will not ever be the president of the United States. And look, I hate to be the bearer of unpleasant news, Mrs. Clinton, but when you have the entire news media completely in the tank for you, and the entire U.S. government and deep state on your side, and your opponent has a 37% favorable rating on the day of the election, and you have paid tens of millions of dollars to frame him as a Russian intelligence asset, and you still manage to lose, and it's not even particularly close, that is the universe telling you that you're not ever going to be the president. But sometimes we need to face reality head on, with a clear head, with open eyes. And Mrs. Clinton, the reality is that the American people really, really intensely dislike you and don't want you for their president. And seriously, who the hell reads their 5-year-old victory speech from an election they lost? For that matter, who the hell writes that speech in the first place? I am no expert political operative, but maybe if you'd spent less time during the last 10 days of that campaign doing victory laps, writing self-congratulatory speeches, and picking out new drapes for the Oval Office, you might have had time to notice that Donald J. Trump was hard at work winning the damn election that you were so certain was your birthright. And whoopsie! Maybe that's why the coach always used to say you should run all the way through the tape when you get to the finish line. But maybe Hillary doesn't want the presidency quite as badly as we've always thought she did. Because there's one more gambit she could try, one more stop she could pull out. For if the American people are so shockingly misogynistic that they will never elect a woman named Hillary Clinton to be their president, perhaps they would elect a man named Harold Clinton. And don't laugh too quickly, because if Bruce Jenner can become Bruce Jenner with tits at age 65, then I think Hillary is still safely in the window of eligibility. Granted, she would have to abandon her dream of being the first woman president, but first transgender president would be just as auspicious an achievement, I think, wouldn't it? And Bill Clinton would be the first same-sex spouse in presidential history. I love my husband Harold every bit as much as I used to love my wife Hillary, and I'm real proud that he's the president. I hope I haven't gone and given her any ideas here. I might not put it past her, actually. Desperate people are capable of desperate acts, after all. But let's leave it there for tonight. Thank you very much for watching. I hope everyone has a pleasant tomorrow. Do not comply. Get off my lawn.